Hello and welcome to our Passing Through series. We have with us in the studio today Gill Dickenson. She's become a very good friend of ours. Welcome.
Thank
Gill.
you, Joanna.
I'm glad you could come here. So Gill, just explain to us a little bit about your background first of all.
Well, born in 1970, so that makes me 49. An identical twin, but we didn't stay in Salford. We were adopted at 6 weeks old into the Dickenson family, which we are Dickinsons now. Lived in Bury for a while, and then our family moved to St Anne's, and we were brought up in St Anne's. But we didn't have we were christened, but we didn't have a Christian upbringing. We were never sent to Sunday school. There was no talk in the home of God, Jesus, the Bible. It was all it was at a time when those things were becoming mythological to people, and not real. But I always knew that there was a God. I just knew that there was a God, and I would talk to him at times, even as a child. And I would say, God, the real God that made everything, it's you I'm talking to, And I knew that if he was real, and he had anything to tell me or show to me about this life or something I needed to know, I just knew that there would be a point in my life where he would just reveal that to me. And that was
this is a time when there was no Christian education in schools?
Well, there was your grace before your meals, and there was the hymn singing, which there isn't much of now, is there? Quite traditional stuff, But you know what it's like as a kid. You learn the words, you learn the song, you get some of them wrong, don't you? And that's it. Like the Lord's Prayer, you learn that by rote, don't you? But it doesn't really mean anything. It's just something you've learnt in your mind. I don't think they would teach anything like that now, would they? No, I don't think it's the same now at all.
So you still had assemblies then?
Yeah, we had assemblies, and they were like Christian assemblies. Yeah. But there was words in the hymns. I remember asking teachers, what does redeemed mean, and what's a pilgrim, and but I never really got an answer, so I just left it because I knew in the back of my mind if there was anything I needed to know or explaining, that God himself would just explain it one day. And that was always in the back of my mind, so I didn't really worry about it.
So were you happy as a child? Did you have a nice home upbringing?
Yeah, we had my dad was an accountant, mum's social worker. She went back to work when we were, we were probably about 8 or 9 or something. So, it wasn't a very loving home.
Did you always know you were adopted?
Yeah, we always knew we were adopted. That wasn't sprung on us. We always knew we were adopted. We always knew we were born in Salford. But it wasn't, we were quite spoilt, me and my sister, materially. If we wanted something, we'd have it. But not very secure. We weren't very secure. I think we felt maybe a bit rejected all our lives or something, which is no excuse for anything, but looking back, I'm trying to remember how I felt, and I think it helped having each other. I think if you were a one on your own, it would be different, but it wasn't we had grandparents our grandfather was quite a loving man, but in the actual home, it was quite strict and quite, it wasn't cold, but it just wasn't a very loving, chatty, comfortable place to be. But you don't even realise that until you're older and you go to other people's houses and see that it's different, do you? So it was just normal life to us. My brother was born to my mum and dad when we were 4, nearly 5. So we had a baby in the home, and
so your mum and dad, you're talking about your adopted mum and dad?
Our adopted parents, okay. But me and John just always kind of had each other,
So what was school life like then? When did you get
on
well at school?
Yeah, we were both very, very intelligent. We were very clever at school, but we were a bit naughty. We weren't particularly shy me and my sister, we did argue quite a bit in that because you're very similar. When we got to about 11 or 12, we started going to a spiritualist church, and because we were twins, they thought, identical twins, there'll be something a bit mysterious here. And so we ended up attending that for quite a while. We had a couple of friends that went as well, but me and Joanne ended up sitting in circle at this woman's house every Tuesday, I think it was, and We'd have our auras painted and things. And so it was a big open door to like a spiritual side of things, which I think that was the meeting a need. I didn't have a spiritual side of me. I had a hunger, spiritual hunger, that wasn't being met, if you like. And I think that fulfilled it at the time. You know, I was looking into things that were like, oh, you know, in the afterlife and that, you know. Probably about 11 or 12, something like that. And we had our auras painted, you know, we had these 2 pictures above our beds with these auras that this man had painted. But then when in high school, the first year, and some of the second year, most of the second year, was fairly kind of routine, top sets for everything. But then I just went wild. I went completely off the rails. Now, whether you can blame hormones or, I don't know, or just getting older or different things, you know, boys come into it at that age and things. And looking back, I can see probably that spiritual door was open as well, in a sense, in my life, that I don't think that helped, because that seemed to coincide with everything starting to go wrong. And everything started to go wrong. I ended up, well, I was smoking by then, drinking, especially at the weekends. By the time I was nearly 14, I'd been expelled from high school.
Okay.
I was always in trouble. Was sent to another high school and lasted 4 months there. By the time I was 13, I'd done everything. You know.
Why did you only last 4 months at a new school?
Yeah, I was just wild. I know that's hard to believe now, but I was absolutely wild. I would not do as I was told. I was dead cheeky. I just blatantly smoke in the playground and things, you know. I'd even turn up to school drunk and that, you know. Right. So, yeah. And at 13, I was in the pubs and clubs. They didn't ask you, I didn't want ID like they did now. Hanging around with a gang that most of them was older than I was. Some were the same age. And even though looking back we weren't malicious, we certainly were naughty. But yeah, just kind of off the rails. And I kind of slipped through the net education-wise, because I didn't really have any education after that. It wouldn't happen now, right. But it was different then.
So, how old were you when you left school?
Well, once I was expelled at 13, I didn't have any education really. Formal education after that, really. They put me in, they gave me a couple of private tutors, which I'd never turn up for, really. And they put me in college at 15, a year younger than you should be, because they decided she's clever, she's bored, let's put her in college. But the only good thing about college for me was I could smoke, because you couldn't smoke at school, but you could at college because you were 16, you know. Yeah. But I wasn't, I was 15, and I was with people that were the year older and that, but I didn't want to settle down and learn and, you know, so my mum had dropped me off she still talks about this day, she'd drop me off at the front and she'd be waiting out the back, she'd drive straight to the back and there I would pop out the back, you know, and I'd just be off running around town with whoever or meeting whoever in the pub or, I know, and I ended up, they did, funnily enough, put me in for 5 O-levels. They put me down to sit 5 O-levels, which I never went to the classes, but I still got the date when to sit them. And I ended up going and sitting the English language one because I didn't have to revise for it, you know. And I was drunk. English. Yeah. I was drunk and I got a C.
Wow.
I know, yeah. So I was like, oh. So, and after that, it was the same kind of lifestyle. I was still wild. I managed to keep it. I left home at 15.
So did you manage to get any jobs?
Yeah. So I left home at 15. I was working in a rest home, and I was only working a couple of evenings and weekends. I'd lied about my age. I'd got a flat, and I remember the flat I was earning £25 a week, I think it was, and the flat was 21. I remember that, so there wasn't much money. But my mum was still quite supportive. She'd come and make sure I was all right, and she'd lend me bits of money and things like that. But the reason I was out of home and had a flat was because I was wild. I couldn't be wild at home, you know. So instead of staying out all the time, I just was in my own place. Home was very stifling to me. And so I got my own place, and then I ended up meeting I was with different lads and that all the time, but I ended up meeting a lad when I think I was just 17 or something, and we ended up together, and I got pregnant. I was 17 and I was pregnant, and I didn't know what to do at all, and I didn't know how I was going to cope with this baby, and I decided, I remember sitting there crying. I was in the bath actually, and sitting there crying, thinking, no, I want to keep it and bring it up and be a mum, have something to love. But I was kind of getting pressure from other people saying, oh no, you've got your whole life ahead of you, and you know, the pressure. And I remember sitting there in the bath one day crying because I really, really wanted this baby. But I ended up, in the end, having an abortion, and I can't blame anybody else because it was my decision. And I ended up having an abortion. But I knew that I'd killed this little life, and the guilt stayed with me. You know, it stayed with me. Anyway, me and my partner, my boyfriend or whatever, we ended up getting married, and I got pregnant again. Now, the man that I married, he had his own problems. He was addicted to amphetamine, which I didn't really know how much until then, until after we got married. I'd come home from work, because I still worked, I managed to work part-time, even though I was off my head most of the time. And I worked part-time at this rest home, and I'd come home from work and I'd be absolutely shattered, and all of a sudden I'd be like wired, raving all over the place because he'd spike me drink with speed. Right. And he'd do that quite a bit, so that didn't help everything, because I'd have to go back to work the next day, and I'd had no sleep and that. Anyway, so we had quite a volatile relationship. You know, we'd fight physically all the time. He was very, very kind of emotionally, very clingy, very jealous, very... and he would get physical, you know.
So did you go to work with bruises?
Yeah. And people that watching it, if they watch it, will remember me turning up at work with bruises and things. And if I wasn't fighting with him, I was fighting with somebody else, usually my sister or something like that. You know, physically? I was always black and blue. Yeah. Really? Oh. Because I was very angry. I was a very angry teenager child. I was full of anger and angst, and you know, and drinking and fighting. That kind of got it out. I mean, at that age you can't really articulate your feelings, you just act them out, don't you? You know, at this age you can look back and think,
you're always so defensive as well, aren't you?
Yeah, and of course complete breakdown with the relationship with my parents as well, which I didn't have any security there, so I was just kind of on my own, but never on my own, if you like. So I became pregnant again, and I lost this baby at 4 months old, and at 4 months term, and I thought, oh, maybe I can never have children because I've taken the life of this child, and now this one's been taken from me. Maybe it's like, you know, it's like a punishment for killing the other one. And that was, I didn't know anything about God or God's love or anything then, or about the Word of God, the Bible, or but that was just in my mind, you know, Anyway, we'd been married a few months. My husband wasn't supportive in that at all. He was awful, actually. He was awful. You know, I remember being pregnant one night and he locked me out on the stairs all night, pretended he wasn't in the flat when I came home, and, you know, and it just all kinds of stuff happened. Anyway, I became pregnant again, and I was about 4 months pregnant, and I don't think my husband really wanted a baby in our lives because I think he was so possessive and obsessive. I think he was just happy just having me, and anything else that took away from my attention for him. But when I was about 4 months, I remember it was New Year's Eve, and I was about 4 months pregnant, and he just knocked me to the floor. We'd both been out. He'd knocked me to the floor. He was drunk and whatever. And I ended up leaving them. He locked me out of the flat. I couldn't get in. He'd take my handbag when he'd knocked me to the floor and run off. You know, we were outside and we were coming back from somewhere, and I just remember there was a police van down the end of the road, and the police lady came and said, "What's the matter? Are you all right?" Because I was on the floor. And so I told her. She went to try and get my handbag back, and he wouldn't even open the door to the police. So she took me in the police van round to my mum and dad's. My mum was working nights at the time, and there was just my dad there. And he was very good, actually. And he put me to bed and everything was fine. But I didn't go back. I left, and I thought, I can't go back to that.
No.
So I ended up, we'd lived in Bury for a few years when I was really little. So I ended up getting in my car and driving all the way to Bury and walking into the police station there, crying and saying, do you know an emergency social worker? I don't know where I got that from, but, and so, so this social worker got me put in a women's refuge in Bury, and I was there for a few months, and eventually, I was pregnant, and eventually they gave me a flat in Radcliffe, so that was fine. I was starting this new life with this new baby. Nobody really knew where I was. My mum knew where I was, but I didn't dare tell anyone else because my husband had been, trying to find me. But my son, when I was 8 months pregnant, was stillborn.
Oh.
Little boy called Zachary. I called him Zachary.
So you actually gave birth to him?
Yeah, I gave birth to him. Yeah, but he was dead. So, so I called him Zachary because it means God has remembered. Wow. I remember thinking he'll always, God will remember this.
And you knew that?
Yeah. But like I say, I didn't have I suppose I did have some relation, but it wasn't anything,
Strange, isn't it?
Yeah. And I remember it, and I was devastated. And I remember at the time just pouring out my grief in poetry as well. And I talked to God all the time. I didn't know him, and I didn't know the Bible or anything. I didn't have one. But I just talked to him. I'd say, God, whoever you are that made everything, the real God, I'm talking to you, and I'd talk to him a lot. Anyway, eventually, I heard that my husband had moved to London, so I went back home, but I didn't go back home to St Anne's. I went to the town next door, which was Blackpool. Now, my teenage years had all been drink and drugs. It had all been, weed, amphetamine, speed, magic mushrooms, trips, all kinds of uppers and downers. And, if you can think of it, I'd probably done it. And when I went back to Blackpool, I got involved with some people there that were heroin addicts, and I ended up going out with somebody that was, and I ended up a heroin addict. And I was a heroin addict for 10 years, 7 years, and then 3 years, I think it was, yeah. So I was a heroin addict for, in total, 10 years. Now, I'd met this guy, Jimmy, and he was actually the brother of my best friend at the time, who I'd met in Blackpool, and we'd worked together. And I ended up, he was a heroin addict as well. And to make our money, we ended up dealing. Some people shoplift, some are prostitutes, some are this, that and the other, but we ended up dealing to make our cut, So we had this business, and I was pregnant. I got pregnant, and I had my first son, which is really my second son, isn't it? My first son, Corey, he was born in 91. And then when I was pregnant with my second son, Reese, in 93, I went into hospital to do a detox for when the baby was born. So they'd get you off the heroin, onto the methadone. It was just methadone then, there was nothing else. Onto methadone, then off it completely. And hey presto, you're fine, you can have a baby. Social services never got involved then or anything. It just wasn't like that then. And so I went into hospital. The dad was in jail again. He was always in and out of jail, and he was doing I remember it was 21 months.
So had you gone back to this guy then?
No, this was Jimmy that I'd met. This was
right, okay.
the man I'd met in Blackpool.
Right.
I never saw my husband again after that.
Right.
I never saw him after that. But I'd met this guy, Jimmy, who was my best friend's brother. That's how I met. My best friend was Jane. And so he was in jail doing 21 months with his other brother. We were both doing it together. And I went into hospital. I think my mum had my son. And while I was in there, I met a Christian. I was 24 years old, and 23 I was at the time. And I got talking to her. And we started talking. She said she was a Christian, and straight away my ears were open, and she started telling me things about God and church and that, and she invited me to a church. I remember her saying to me, you seem to know so much about God, but I didn't really.
Right,
I just sounded like I did,
strange.
because I'd said I'd talked to her, and she gave me a Bible, actually. And I remember opening the Bible I was in a room on my own, opening the Bible in the hospital, and the nurse coming in and being so embarrassed. I was like, what? I was so embarrassed.
I think Christians even are now.
Yeah, I was really embarrassed. Jesus, God, the Bible, church, such an embarrassing thing, so uncool, you know.
Yeah.
So anyway, I did end up going to church, and I went there I started to read the Bible, and I went there for probably a year, and I heard the gospel that Jesus Christ, God had come in the flesh, Jesus Christ, and he died for my sin so that all my sin could be paid for, that when I stand before him at the end of time, I will be where he is, you know. I won't be in hell. Yeah. And hell was real, and heaven was real, and God was real, and Jesus was real. And the more I read the Bible, it was like God started to introduce himself almost. I started to get to know him through the Bible, but also just him spiritually as well, you know. And
a relationship.
Yeah, I started to have this relationship. And anyway, something called the Toronto Blessing came to that church. It was a Pentecostal church. And I remember they going to see this man, and he was talking about all these different manifestations and things that had been happening and this, that, and the other. But it all ended up with people in a pile, jumping up and down and singing and making animal noises. And they were in a pile on the floor, on top of each other, piling on top of each other. And God said, that's not me. And I knew it wasn't God, because my God, the one that I now knew, was an almighty, powerful God. He was not that frivolous. You know, that wasn't him at all. He's a God that parted the Red Sea, that made everything, that, you know, it wasn't anything about jumping all over each other on the floor, you know.
And did he talk to you about anything else?
Apart from just saying that wasn't him. But I was going to a place at the time where maybe a few ex-addicts had gone and that, for this spiritual counselling. And I remember saying to the counsellor there, that wasn't God. And he said, yeah, it is, it's God. You know, you can't say somebody that talks about God and tells people the gospel and that, you can't say that they're not from God, that it's, you know. And straight away I remembered Acts 16 in the Bible. I'd just been looking at it. And there's a girl in there that was possessed and that follows Paul and Silas, is it Paul and Silas round, saying, these are the men of the Most High God that show unto us the way of salvation. And so I remembered that, and I thought, yes, somebody that's completely anti-God can say those things. So I said, yes, they can. What about the girl in Acts 16? And he just didn't say anything, and brought this woman in. And this woman said, she pretended to pray, and then went, I know what's wrong with you. And I said, what's wrong with you? She said, no, it don't matter, I just know what's wrong with me. And she gave me some leaflets. But as I went out...
That was a good get.
I know, yeah. But as I went out, God said, just don't go back there. Don't go back to the church. So I was like, right, where am I going to go now, Lord? But the woman I'd met in hospital had a brother who'd got saved as well, who'd been saved, who was a Christian, that went to another church. And so I was at hers one night, and he came round, and he had a tape of his pastor preaching. Right. And so he gave it me to listen to. And I went home that night and I listened to it. And as it started to play, the only way I can describe it is God was there in my bedroom. And it was so powerful, I couldn't even stand up under it. I had to sit on the bed. It almost drained me. Wow. And all I kept saying was, wow, there really is a God. Even though I knew there was a God, now I really knew. Yeah. And I was like, wow, there really is a God. He's here. Wow, there really is a God. And the Bible became like a living thing, like an electric current was going through it. It was alive. And it was like that, and I read it, and as I read it, pages that I'd never read before, I understood it as well.
What do you mean you never understood it before?
Maybe some parts I hadn't read, but I was reading a different version before as well, and this was the King James version, and God said, that is my word. Right. And so when I'd picked it up and it became alive, as God was there, it was alive and living. But I understood it. You know, if you somebody that's never read the Bible before, or only read a bit, can pick it up, open it up to maybe at the middle of a prophecy in Isaiah and don't know what it means, But whatever I read, I knew what it meant. Wow. I knew what he was saying. And that went on for about 4 or 5 days. And even the woman that I'd met in the hospital was telling her brother, like, wow, you want to see Gillian? She's this, that and the other. And, I couldn't stop it. I was so full of this, like, power and life. And, Yeah. And her brother said, tell her to calm down. Oh. So she said, my brother just said, tell her to calm down. And I forced it away, in a sense. I forced myself to calm down. I felt like I was doing something wrong. Maybe that's how I shouldn't be. But looking back now, I should have ignored that. But I didn't know.
You're getting quenched, really, weren't you?
I didn't know. And I was affecting people around me, And anyway, life went on for a while, and
so
a few years.
You detoxed here now as well?
I detoxed and that, I think I'd had it when I came out of the hospital a few times, but I was clean and that, and and I'm going to church and everything's fine. I'm going to this church now where the pastor on the tape was a different one, and I was really fed there, and I was taught the Bible, and it was really, really good, that. The pastor really knew his Bible, and he was really, he really helped me. Anyway, about 3 years later, my best friend, who was the sister of my children's dad, who I didn't have back. God said, don't have him back when he comes out of prison, and I hadn't done. I had for a couple of weeks, but then, he'd gone. She died. She was found dead. She'd been dead 5 days when they found her. And I was devastated. So it was me that was the point of contact for the coroner, and that the coroner had come to my house and things. It was me that went and sorted all the flat out, the house out, and that, and but that meant I had to have something to do with a brother again, which was the kid's dad, who was still dealing. So he'd come into the house to meet the coroner. He'd come to mine, and he'd come in with it in his hand, with the gear in his hand. And he did that a few times, and I said, Jimmy, you're out of order doing that, coming in that, having that in front of me, And so, right, okay. But I knew that if he kept doing that, I would end up back on it. It was too much temptation when I'd not been off it that long, And so I did. He carried on coming, because he was thinking money for him, it's another customer. And I did, and I ended up back on it. Plus I was low as well with my friend dying and that, I was in a very vulnerable place. So I ended up back on it for a few years as well, and that's the kids remember those few years.
Oh, do they?
Yeah, the kids remember those few years, because they're about, 8 and 6 or 7 and 5 or something or whatever. But then the Lord did deliver me completely off it and off everything else, the drink and drug, everything, But during that 3 years, I still went to church, but I was just praying all the time, Lord, please deliver me completely. I don't want to fall again and come back into this, I want to be free, completely free. And it says in your word that if the Son sets you free, you're free indeed. I need making free. And the Lord did do that in the end. And I didn't even withdraw. I didn't go to rehab or anything. I didn't even withdraw. I just stopped it. And apart from not sleeping for about 6 weeks, I was fine. I was absolutely fine. And that's what it's been like ever since. So now I'm at the point where everything's gone. There's no cigarettes, there's no drink, there's nothing. The Lord has completely changed my life.
Wonderful.
So after that, we moved house eventually, and we had 11 years in a wonderful house by a park, a big park in Blackpool, and the kids were brought up, because I knew that night when God was in my bedroom, he spoke to me and he said quite a few things, but one of the things that I knew was that God had not just done something for me, he'd done it for my family. He'd changed things for my boys. Things were going to be different for my boys as well. And when I look at them now, and how the wonderful men, and the lovely one's married, one isn't, successful in the world's terms, they both are, but really lovely lads. And I think, they'd have probably either been dead, in jail,
Yeah.
the life that
Yeah.
they'd have
Yeah.
brought, you know. So I realised now that's what he meant. He's done something for them.
Yeah.
Plus
Yeah.
they know the truth as well, don't
Yeah.
they?
Yeah.
And,
Yeah.
so
Seen both sides, haven't they?
yeah, and they've not really been into anything like that, you
No,
know. I mean, a bit
great.
bits and bobs as teenagers,
Yeah,
maybe, when
yeah,
they're with
yeah,
the crowd,
yeah.
but they were always dead honest with me though as well,
Right.
because they remembered my life,
Yeah.
and we talked openly about things, you
Yeah.
know. And I went back to college because I'd not had any education from being 13 or 14,
Right.
and I went straight into doing a degree. And everyone was like, that's a real mountain to climb, you're not going to be able to do that, you know. And I got first class honours with this
Wow.
degree. But the Lord helped me. I know He helped me.
Yeah, we must have done.
And I got a first in everything.
Wow.
Not just my dissertation or for everything that last year. I got
Yeah.
my exams, everything. But I know the Lord helped me.
Yeah,
It's like
yeah.
there's a verse about restoring the years that the locust has
yeah,
eaten.
yeah.
And I felt like He was doing that, you know, restoring it. That's what I should have been like when I'd finished school, but I never did. I went to work for the council for adult social services, and I was there for 10 or 11 years. Everybody knew I was a Christian, you know, and most people had heard my story and that, and I had some great friends there, and I still have. The boys grew up and did well, and it was, you know, just going to church and this, that and the other. But the Lord brought me into a closer relationship with Him a few years ago, because I was thinking life with God cannot consist of going to church 3 times a week, going to every meeting, and then just living like everybody else for the rest of the week. That's just like a club.
Yeah, yeah.
You know, it's not, where's the power of God? Where is God in a life? And He started to show me that it's faith, isn't it? We've no real faith in Him.
Right.
You know, with faith in men.
And that's the only
haven't
thing that
we?
can please God, isn't it?
Yeah, without faith, it's impossible to please God, yeah. And so I knew I wasn't pleasing Him. I would in the bits of faith I had, but the just shall live by faith. It says that when you belong to the Lord...
Well, the just shall live by His faith.
Yeah. So living by faith. And
Yeah.
I thought, I said, right, Lord, I can see how I'm supposed to be, but I don't know how to get there.
Yeah.
I don't know how to get from this point of living and relying on everything else. I had a good job that paid well, to getting to where I'm just depending on You for everything. Will You get me there? And it was a bit frightening asking that, because I didn't know what He was going to bring me through.
It's funny though, Jill, because we were talking before about faith and how everybody has been given a measure of faith, because we all believe in something, don't we? Whether it's doctors or whatever, but you couldn't live your life without faith. So it's where you put your faith into.
Absolutely.
It makes all the difference, that.
Yeah. Because some people, they put it in men, they put it in
Possessions,
medicine,
don't they?
possessions, money, you know, idols and heroes, whether it's sports or music or whatever, you know, or yourself. You can have a tremendous faith in yourself, and really you're as weak as anything, but you just don't realise you are, do you? It's like self-confidence, faith in your parents, your family, your whatever, But if your faith's in God, that created all that anyway, you can't get any greater faith, can you? You know, and it's real faith.
And there's a reward. There's a reward with that, isn't there?
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, there's a rewarder of them that diligently seek Him. Yeah, and that's what I was doing. I could see that my life was no different than anybody else's, in a sense, apart from attending church and having the outside clean, no drinking, no smoking, no swearing, no, you know, which is what a lot of Christianity is,
what good
isn't it?
people do.
What good people do.
Good atheists can do that as well.
Yeah, my parents haven't got a Christian bone in the body, you know, but they don't drink, don't smoke, don't swear, you know, nothing like that, don't do anything. They're good people, righteous in the world sense, you know. And everybody will say, I've spoke to the homeless on the street, the junkies, the alkies, the whatever, and they all say, well, I'm not a bad person, I've never murdered anybody, I've never this. But you're comparing yourself to other people. If you compare yourself to God's standard, which is perfection, we all fall short. It doesn't matter, does it?
So how have you proved God then where faith's concerned?
Right, well, I started to pray to the Lord, and I said, I can't see how to get there, but I know I'm supposed to just give everything up and fall completely on You and trust You, but I don't know how to do it. Do you want me to give up my job? Do you want me to, you know, and I didn't want to, really, you know, I didn't want to give up my job. But I became ill. I became really, really poorly. There was a diagnosis of Lyme disease, but I don't even think it was that. I don't even think it was diagnosable, but I was so ill. I can't even put it into words what I was like, and all I could do was cry. 24 hours, cry. Everybody was sick to death of me, and I was in such pain with my head.
How long did that go on for?
Well, that went on for, I had 6 months off. I had to come off work. I had no energy, dizzy. I couldn't see properly. Everything, I don't know, it was like something had poisoned my whole system, and it came from nowhere. So I had 6 months off work. When I went back to work, I had to go back to work because I was going on half pay and I couldn't afford that. So I went back to work, and I wasn't well when I went back, but they were quite good with me, and the Lord was really good because he moved me from the house that I worked in to another house where I could be ill. The house that I was originally in, there's no way I'd have survived there. So I was in the best place that I could be ill.
Right.
And I talked to him a lot, and I prayed a lot, and we got really close again, me and the Lord. He also used that time, I was abandoned.
Funny how tragedy does
I know,
that,
yeah. He also used that time to to do some pruning in my life and get rid of the people that would hinder what he was going to do. So there was a couple of friends in particular, and it hurt at the time when they kind of abandoned me, but it was absolutely the Lord's pruning, and I'm dead grateful for it now. And they wouldn't understand, I don't think, now where I am. And so eventually I got better, to the point where I've still got, it's still crippled my hands and things like that, and my eyes are still painful in my head and things, but eventually I got functionable and well, I would say well again, because I lost myself in all that. It was awful. And the Lord, I started to pray about my job as well and where I was, and what do you want me to do, Lord? I know you gave me this job and that. And somebody came to work with us, a new member of staff. I'd been there like 10 years, and she came to work in this house that I was in. And after about 6-8 months, something like that, she said, I'm going to do my nursing, come with me and do it. And I said, absolutely not, I'm not doing that. I'd have to give up my job, not have any money coming in except a bit of a loan that would maybe pay for just like a bit of the rent and bills or something. No, I'm not doing that. But what I need to tell you as well is, when I was really poorly, we had a big 3-bedroom house, it was rented, and 3 o'clock in the morning, God said to me, I want you to give your house up. And so I was like, wow, okay. So I put the notice in, gave my house up, but within 5 days or so, I'd got this flat, which is, I knew it was where God wanted me as well through the circumstances.
Yeah.
And so that's where I am now. I'm in this little 1-bedroom flat. One son had gone off to New Zealand, and the other one, Reese, went to live with my mum for a bit and then with his girlfriend. So, and they've got a little baby now, my little granddaughter. So so I'd moved into this little flat. So I'd kind of given up the house, and the Lord had me testing him really by faith. God says, prove me.
Right.
Your faith is, the Bible says, faith is the evidence of things not seen. It's
faith
evidence,
is the substance of things
hoped for, and the evidence of things not seen. Yeah, thank you. And it's substance and evidence. You take them into court. They're not just a blind kind of ethereal thing. It's not a blind faith. It's in somebody, like you were saying before. So,
but I think faith also comes from hearing a word from God. You can't just decide to do something and think it's faith, can you?
No, you've got to hear from him. Yeah. And if you've got that relationship with him, because when I was ill, he talks to you all the time. You hear him all the time. So, and he'd shown me that giving up my house and not knowing where to go, and then in providing this flat for me, he was like teaching me that it's safe to trust him.
Yeah.
So I'm in this flat.
It's something you've got to learn, isn't it, faith?
Yeah, but it's like little steps. It takes you little steps till before you know it, you're completely abandoned to him. In the end, I prayed about the nursing because it kept being on my mind, and there was management jobs coming up, and they were trying to get me to do management jobs where I was at work, trying to get me to go for the management job. And then a social work position came up, a trainee position that I could have gone for, and there was all these temptations to do other things, and the foolish option was the nursing. And I prayed about it, and God said, I want you to do the nursing. And so I gave up a good job. I had no savings. God had made sure any savings I had were dwindled when I was poorly to nothing. And I said, but Lord, I'll have enough money from the student loan to pay me rent and most of my bills, but then I'll have nothing. I'll have nothing for me, nothing for food, nothing for petrol, nothing for books, nothing for birthdays, nothing for anything. I'll have no money. And God said, well, do you trust me or not? I said, yeah, okay. So I did it. And I went to do my nursing.
Big step, eh?
Yeah, it was. But I felt so happy doing it. So excited, yeah. I'd worried about money all my life, even as a Christian, and I always had it, from working and whatever. And then I didn't have any, and I wasn't worried.
But you started off by saying, "He who the Son sets free is free indeed."
Yeah.
You're even being freed from that, aren't you?
Yeah, the worry of it all, and that was free. It was brilliant.
Yeah.
And there's a verse in that. So I went to do my nursing. Now, the place where I was supposed to go was on Brook Street, and it was Brook Building, and I was even putting the surname of the person that whose class I was putting was Brooks. And I thought, Lord, what's all this Brooks? Anyway, it suddenly hit me that there's a story in the Bible, there's an account in the Bible of Elisha the prophet who, when there was a famine in the land, the Lord sent him to the brook Cherith. He sent him to the brook Cherith, and he fed him there. He fed him with gave him water from the brook, and he fed him with the ravens twice a day, brought food for him until the brook dried up. And I said, oh, right, Lord, are you telling me it's all right? You'll send ravens to feed me twice a day? Yeah, right, okay. And as soon as that went, I was put in a different class, everything,
You didn't need the Brooks anymore.
I didn't need the Brooks anymore. And the two ravens turned out to be a friend of mine and her partner who were at the uni, and they fed me every morning. They bought me breakfast every morning and took me to their house every night for tea.
Wow.
And they didn't know they were ravens. I've told them since, they know the ravens now. And it's funny because they're both black hair as well. They look like ravens. And that happened up until Christmas. So the Lord fed me with the ravens, twice a day. So, and my friend, she'd even give me an envelope. I've saved up some petrol money for you. And people had even people that didn't know my circumstances would say, would give me things or whatever, or food or something or whatever. And then at Christmas, I had £100 pushed through my door and then £50 pushed through my door. And, I was like, wow, Lord.
Oh, it's brilliant.
I know. Yeah. But after Christmas, my birthday's on the 3rd of January. On the 4th of January, my son and his girlfriend had taken me out for a meal. And while I'm in the meal...
The restaurant.
The restaurant,
You're not actually in the meal, eh?
Not in the meal. Well, yeah, probably. While I'm in the restaurant, I got a text, and it was off a lady who, her and her husband, I'd known them less than a year, probably 7 or 8 months or something. They were Christians. I'd been to their house. I knew them through a friend. I'd just recently met them. I'd been to their house for Bible studies and things, for a few times. And it was a text off her to say that they'd been praying, her husband in particular had been praying about where to send money because they knew I was doing my nursing degree, but they didn't know my financial situation. Where to send money because with not being in church and things, they'd send them to Philippines or something like that, they'd give money.
Yeah.
And God had told them to send it to me.
Wow.
So they said, we're going to give you a certain amount of money every week for 3 years till you've finished your degree, and anything else you need in the meantime or even afterwards, we're going to get you through this. We'll see you through it.
Wow.
And I was like, wow, Lord, wow.
Isn't that amazing?
I know, God just provided for me weekly so I don't have to bother about anything.
Isn't
It's
that
just,
lovely?
I know. And all little things that have come up in the way, I know God's getting me through this.
Yeah, that's so great because that's something that you can budget on, isn't it?
Yeah.
That's not just for today.
Yeah.
But that's it's telling you a period as well.
Yeah.
Isn't that brilliant?
It is as well because I was so bad with money. I've had to learn. It's forced me to learn to budget.
Yeah.
Where I didn't before. I was really profligate
and that's the blessing
with money,
of getting it week by week rather than month by month because you can blow it, can't you? No, that's brilliant.
I know, and I was like, wow, Lord. And so that's the position I'm in now, you know. I'm just coming to the end of the first year, going into the second year. And yeah, I know that the Lord's with me. I know He's supporting me, and whatever comes along, I know that there'll be temptations in the way and there'll be hindrances and obstacles, but for some reason, God wants to get me through this 3 years.
So are you in a church, Jill?
No, because I was for years and years. I believe the Lord brought me out of church because He started to show me things that weren't of Him. So the sign on the dotted line membership for voting privilege, the tithing, which in the New Testament, things like that, you know, and like the fact that everybody's is at a certain standard at church, but then I've heard people swearing, or I know people that have done this, that, and the other outside of church, and I thought that's not reality. That's like a club, isn't it? I wanted reality, and for me personally, I'm not saying anything about anyone that goes to church. I'm not saying anything about anybody's relationship with the Lord or church or anything. But for me, I could not be close to the Lord in church. It was the biggest hindrance to me, because Jesus is real and He's powerful, and He wants to work through you and live through you. He wants to carry on His work through you. You die to yourself and let Him live His life through you. And I found in church, you were living your life through church and church standards and church approval. And you've
got to learn the difference, haven't you, between church and God? Because sometimes I think we group them together.
Yeah. And I'd also learned about God, you know, through the Bible and through church, but I realised I didn't know Him personally like I should, and that was a hindrance as well. So I believe He took me out and took me to Himself.
I think often God gets rid of all the props, doesn't He? So that it's you and Him on your own.
Yeah, and that's where I ended up.
Yeah,
me, God, and my Bible.
So it's okay being on, you know, out of church, but don't you need fellowship? Because the Bible does talk about forsake not the assembling of yourself together.
Absolutely. I was on my own, just me, the Lord, but I was desperate for somebody to talk to about the Lord, somebody that could see things as I saw now, because I believe my eyes had been opened.
To identify with you,
Yeah, I knew it, somebody like-minded. I knew it wasn't going to be somebody back in church, because I was in a different place. The Bible says God sets the solitary in families, and it's important to have fellowship with people, and it's important to have fellowship with people that are like-minded as well, you know, so you can grow and build each other up. And,
because iron sharpens iron. You need the challenge, don't you? Somebody else to look at your life.
Yeah. And some people, depending where they're at, will find that in church. Some people will find it in house groups. For me, the Lord led me to a group in Thornton, but also through Morris's teaching to Barratt Ministries, where I have fellowship with you every fortnight. And you need that. You need one another, don't you?
Yeah.
And I think as well with church, it's kind of localised as well, whereas here, they come from all over the country, don't they? It's amazing. And it's a proper feast together and teaching and fellowship. And, you know, it's not so structured, is it? And formal. And it's just, it's lovely. That real fellowship is amazing.
It is,
isn't it? Real fellowship is wonderful. And it's fellowship with the Lord.
Well, thanks very much, Jill, for coming in and sharing all those things. I know some of the things that Jill talked about were very sensitive, because she's opened her heart up. She talked about the problems that she encountered, the fact that she was even adopted. That can be a problem for people. The fact that she had an abortion. And I hope that some of the things that she said will really speak to some people out there, because I know that many people are going through troubles and traumas now. You know, you're confused, you don't know what to do. And, well, God's there for everybody. And if this has helped you, maybe you can pass it on to other people who you think are going through similar problems. God bless you.